What is going on, guys and gals? Brooklyn Bound the Raid Scientist here, and today I'm going to go over 9 tips on how to master the legendary difficulty of Onslaught and make it through all 50 waves with a much easier time. This new Into the Light activity has shown to be rather difficult for a lot of teams, and I'm putting this video together to help learn the tips to get through it. If you find today's video helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel, because otherwise the next video we post might not reach you and help you with your next Destiny challenge. Now, quick disclaimer that these tips are what I found to help provide the most success in clearing all the waves. There are obviously tons of combinations of classes, subclasses, and weapon loadouts that will work and might for you, but these are some of the overarching themes I found that still might be helpful. And if you're here and still watching, I'm guessing you want to make it easier on yourself. You probably also want to consider highly leveraging the loadouts feature overall to put together a few different loadouts for different situations throughout the activity, which we will get into. Alright, so tip number 1 is memorize, learn, or write down all of the rounds for Onslaught because they rotate on a fixed outline. If you know what's coming up, how to prioritize your supers and ammo, then you're going to be set up much better to succeed than if you're completely caught off guard. Here's the pattern, and it repeats for every 10 rounds. So what I say for round 1 also applies for round 11, 21, 31, etc. Before round 1, you're given the chance to build an upgrade. Then, rounds 1 and 2 will be a mix of minors and majors with orange bar and possibly yellow bar enemies. Also on round 2, you will have the possibility for a bonus objective, which will grant heavy ammo crate if you complete it. Then, round 3 will always be an augment wave with the possibility of a Tormentor, Demolitionist, Skybombers, Shielded Skybombers, Mines, etc. Then, before round 4, you're given another chance to build or upgrade defenses. After upgrading, collecting orbs and ammo, rounds 4 and 5 will be standard enemy groupings similar to rounds 1 and 2, but they will typically be a little bit longer with more enemies. Round 6 will then teleport you to the pyramid ship so you can run the spark before returning. And before round 7 starts, you can again build and upgrade. Rounds 7 and 8 are similar to rounds 1 and 2 and 4 and 5 with enemy groupings randomly assigned and the possibility for a bonus objective again on round 8. Then, round 9 is again another augment wave for a chance at Tormentors, Skybombers, Demolitionists, and then finally on round 10, you'll go back to the pyramid ship to fight the boss, which will give a rally flag for full ammo and supers. Then, this repeats again for 10 to 20, 20 to 30, all the way to wave 50. So learn this pattern and write it down so you know exactly how to plan each wave. Note at the ends of rounds 1 and 2, 4 and 5, 7 and 8, there's typically going to be a champion spawn at the end for whichever enemy type you're on. For Hive, it's going to be Unstoppable or Barrier, and for Fallen, it's going to be Barrier or Overload. Tip number 2. Hunters and Warlocks shine in Onslaught due to their utility and crowd control abilities. Use them. Titans, there are plenty of skilled Titans out there that are going to have no issue doing this activity, I'm sure. Many of them probably still aren't watching, but in my personal opinion, they have the least utility out of all 3 classes in this game mode specifically. If you're not phased and you still want to run Titan, I think the best options are going to be probably Solar or Strand, utilizing the healing abilities you get from those classes to help clear out the enemies. However, note that dealing with later round enemies tend to be very lethal because of their high volumes, and sometimes things like Banner of War and Restoration can struggle to keep up. It's preferred to try to spawn trap them and damage them from further away. Hunter's ability to use Deadfall Tether to group up most of a wave, make orbs for the team, clear out enemies quickly, and go invis for objectives or grabbing batteries is extremely strong. And Warlocks, well, they have Well of Radiance, which makes boss fights so much easier and faster, and their ability to use Cenotaph Mass to create endless heavy for the rest of the team is insane. I've had some success also running Stasis Warlock with Osmiomancy Gloves for freezing turrets, but it's best to then swap to Well of Radiance and Phoenix Protocol for boss fights. I'm not going to spend time in this video going through full builds, but these exotic armor pairings and subclasses tend to yield the highest levels of success. Aeon Swifts are also an option to make heavy ammo for any class, But man, you need to be careful because running up to finish yellow bars can be very lethal in later rounds, and delaying and killing enemies so that you can get the finisher off can sometimes be dangerous because they can push the ADU and damage it a little bit faster. Tip number 3. Use your heavy ammo. And understand the ammo economy and get sweaty with your armor swaps for reserves and scavengers. The sheer number of high health enemies, bosses, and high volumes of adds mean you really need to be using your special and heavy ammo as much as possible. Be highly aware that on waves 2s and 8s you can get a bonus objective that will give you an ammo crate for full heavy and special ammo after finishing it. And before wave 10, you also get a rally flag for full ammo as well. After the boss wave on round 10, run around in the boss room and pick up any ammo before grabbing your loot and heading back. When pulling crates and rallying, swap to a chest piece with 3 reserve mods for your elemental heavy of choice, and be sure to have a scavenger of the element of your choice on your boots, and remember that only one of these will work because multiple copies don't stack. On bonus objective rounds, feel free to use your heavy extremely aggressively, because you're going to get a crate that will refill it back to full for the upcoming augment wave right behind it. If your team is good on heavy from ground drops, save the crate for when you really need it. Heavy ammo and special ammo bricks on the ground will stay as you teleport to the pyramid ship and back, so after waves 6 and 10, run around briefly and look for extra ammo before the next wave starts, especially if you were at a different ADU before. Overall, using as much heavy ammo as possible and maximizing your return on heavy will greatly increase your chances of clearing this activity. The enemies at later stages take forever to chunk down with primaries and increase your risk on getting overwhelmed. Toss on that Gallahorn or Eyes of Tomorrow or whatever and just go ham. Tip number 4. Handling scraps and upgrades. A team capable of beating all 50 waves should be able to get through the first 20 waves without buying any upgrades. I would suggest holding all of your scrap for waves 20 to 50 or more than likely even levels 30 to 50 if possible. Remember to toss every possible battery at the ADU even if it's full for extra scrap. The only caveat to this rule is if you're getting wiped by a Tormentor or Demolitionist in the early rounds pretty frequently, you could consider buying a decoy and upgrading it for that reason. The decoys are by far the best purchase option. You can literally aggro Tormentors, Demolitionists, and Majors away from the ADU in a pinch. I had a clear where we were on wave 49 and had Demolitionists, and we had 2 people go down with only 1 person alive, and the decoys kept both Demolitionists busy while we waited for the revive timers to get people up, and it saved our run. Remember that the ADU will move locations as well, so it's better to not use all of your scrap and upgrades early because you likely will be at a different location for the later waves 30 to 40 and 40 to 50. Secondly, turrets are decent as well, and I would prioritize them over the trip mines, and then upgrade the trip mines last. You really want to be in a situation where at waves 30 to 40 and 40 to 50, you have pretty much all of the upgrades done at that location. Tip number 5. Bring a divinity and precision weapons for Tormentors. Tormentors are the hardest part of the entire activity, with Demolitionists being a close second. And because we're talking an endgame activity here, there's a high likelihood that somebody in your fire team should probably have divinity at this point. Bring it and swap to it for Tormentors, and use precision weapons like snipers, linear fusions, and such to take them out. Using divinity on a Tormentor with precision weapons will completely change the interaction. You may lose some ammo due to heavy weapon swaps, but it's still worth it to cook them down so much faster. It's probably better to only swap special weapons so you don't lose your heavy, but you could also switch your heavy as well depending on your ammo situation on the ground, or if you know you have a rally flag upcoming because you're on wave 9 and you're about to go get it at wave 10. Remember to use the loadouts feature and set a Tormentor build ahead of time. And also, as a sidebar for dealing with Tormentors and Demolitionists too for that matter, don't bunch up on the ADU. Get away from it. Drop a Well of Radiance or get to a spot away from the ADU to keep the Demolitionists and Tormentors aggroed on you or the decoys and away from it. You can still focus on the wave of enemies too, and this way the decoys can be extremely helpful. Don't stand in the ADU, drawing them to it and chunking down the health too quickly. Tip number 6. Also on augment rounds 3s and 9s, you will get things like shielded sky bombers, 3 sky bombers, or even mines. Make sure in this you focus on the waves of enemies first. Then figure out your strategy for dealing with those objectives. Do not just quickly take off, leave one person by themselves to get murdered by all the ads, unless your ADU is on the verge of collapse already, and it can't sustain any blasts from the Skyburners. Generally, a full health ADU can take some blasts from the Skyburners without going to zero. And a big ogre or a big brig can be very tanky and are best dealt with while the wave is winding down. You can't necessarily wait until the wave is completely cleared, but you can drop a super, use some heavy, and clear a good chunk of the wave of enemies before you strategize to go get the objective. The mines you get a minute and a half to disarm and can be done pretty easily with an Invis Hunter, or taking out the Major with some heavy before trying to capture it. Keep up with the batteries during this time and you should have plenty of health on the ADU afterward. Tip number 7. Using supers and using exotic armor to generate more super energy if possible. Once you get past wave 10, you not only want to be aggressive using your heavy ammo, as mentioned earlier, but you need to be very aggressive using supers as well. Warlocks on Well of Radiance should swap to Phoenix Protocol when dropping a well to maximize getting it back faster and making orbs for the other players. Hunters should swap to Orpheus Rig when on Tether to again get your super back faster. And side note, make sure if you're on a Hunter or you're on a team with a Hunter, make sure you let the enemies get caught in the Tether before killing them so you can maximize the amount of super energy the Hunter gets back. Titans running roaming supers should use them as often as possible to make as many orbs and clear out as many enemies as they can fast. Do not hold supers for long periods of time, and use them as many times as you can. The only way you should really be considering holding a super is before waves 3 and 9 when the augment waves, because they typically can make dealing those objectives a little easier. Also be mindful of where you place supers as well. Like I just said previously, for Well of Radiance, don't drop it in the ADU region, because enemies will push into you and damage it. Put it away from it. For Tether, drop it between you and the spawn point to capture as many enemies as possible. And if using a bubble or something on Titan, also keep it away from the ADU because it makes it much harder to kill the enemies that are inside of it. Remember that the ADU's damage is just from the enemies standing in the circle near it, not from them shooting it, so you need to keep the enemies completely away from it. Tip number 8. For the boss rooms. On waves 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50, you're going to be in the boss room on the pyramid ship, and most of these bosses can be burned down pretty quickly with heavy ammo while just standing in a Well of Radiance again. However, depending on the boss, or in later waves like 40 and 50, they can have little extra health, take a little extra time, and may exceed the time you have a Well of Radiance, or maybe you don't have a Well Warlock at all. There is this spot on the left side of the room that has a recessed area with some pillars that is excellent cover for any of the boss waves. You aren't immune completely back here, but it provides a ton of cover and a lot of the enemies won't come down, allowing you to take them out easier and focus on the boss. Watch for splash damage, but I highly recommend using this spot if you're at all concerned about survivability during boss waves, especially during later rounds. Tip number 9. This is on the maps and the enemies. Don't run the Moth Yards if you're trying to get 50 wave on Legendary. Instead, either run Midtown or Vostok. Moth Yards, it's alright of a map, but it's way too open and the enemies don't really funnel in tight groups like they do on the other maps, making it extremely annoying and difficult to destroy them with a tether as they are in large groups. They can much easier sneak around you and get behind you to the ADU. Also, my personal opinion is Hive is slightly easier than Fallen. Personally, the invisible marauders that can sneak behind you are a pain. The fallen brigs have no ability to crit until the front comes off, and they seem much tankier than the ogres. The overload captains will insta-teleport to your ADU as well, and I think the exploder shakes and sniper shanks are much more obnoxious than the cursed thrall. I've cleared 50 waves on Legend with both enemy types, and I would much rather do Hive than Fallen. So if all else has failed, try running either Midtown or Vostok maps until you get Hive and see if you have a different experience. Consider all of these tips I've covered and assemble your fire team, and you should be much better equipped to take on Legendary Onslaught, clear the 50 waves to get the Emblem, Triumph, and all those extra rewards. Note that just recently, Bungie posted an update that they're going to update this activity in a future patch to increase the rewards in later rounds and give increased levels of tokens of bravery. So this guide will be even more impactful in the coming weeks after posting it. Good luck out there, Guardians, and if you have any other tips on clearing this activity, builds, etc., drop them down in the comments so everyone can read. Until next time.